I founded Evolution Health a little over 10 years ago in the spare room in my condominium with one client and a whole bunch of passion.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carrie Damon. I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship Education here at Mars, and we are really excited for tonight's Meet the Entrepreneurs for the life sciences and healthcare community around Mars. Tonight we're taking part in actually the Global Entrepreneurship Week. Startup Canada has organized a nationwide challenge called the Canadian Mentorship Challenge. So by being here, you are part of that. We encourage you to use the two Twitter hashtags, MentorsCan and ENT101, and you will see that we're taking pictures and stuff to sort of showcase all the entrepreneurs and people in the life sciences community that we have here tonight. I really want to thank the life sciences practice at Mars for helping us reach out to their best and brightest entrepreneurs. And with that, I would like to announce our moderator. Our moderator tonight is Peter Adams. He is a senior healthcare IT advisor here at Mars. He works to mentor healthcare IT clients from those just starting to grow their ideas to more established entrepreneurs who make revenues of more than $1 million. He's managing about 30 clients in his portfolio, a number that has doubled in the last year, which really shows how fast and growing the healthcare IT space is. It's a very exciting space to be in, and he's going to mention a couple of the initiatives that might be of interest to you, what his practice and his group is doing. So he provides help with resourcing, financing, strategy, and product positioning, and he also helps them find the right partners to validate or develop their solutions. In his spare time, Peter produces and plays music, and he was a member of a number of UK bands ranging from folk through rock to new wave. He played with a band called Last Resort, and in 1978, their single Having Fun reached 29th on the new wave charts. We did threaten that we were going to play the YouTube version. It does exist, but we thought that we would let him off easy, and we'll just put it in the LinkedIn group so you guys can see it tomorrow. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks a lot, Carrie, for sparing me and sparing you all hearing something from the 70s. Incredible to see so many people here who are interested in life science. It's really awesome. The future of healthcare there's a lot of shifting going on in the business, which is creating a lot of opportunity. As you know, money's running out. There's no more money to throw at healthcare. There are huge problems. The demand on the system is doubling every 30 or 40 years. You've probably all heard this. And what I've noticed is we're working a lot with the change makers in the system, in the leadership of the system. And there's this whole new spirit of what can we do in 2 years instead of thinking 10 years and 20 years. And people are also, they're just getting fed up. This whole issue of policy, things like privacy with electronic patient records, all of that issue around consumer access. I can seriously tell you from the places where I've been, especially in Ontario, and even talking to places like Vanguard and Ascension, big systems that are bigger than Canada in the US, there's this whole spirit of we've got to change things and make things better for patients, and more importantly, think about families, caregivers who spend a lot of time, how technology can leverage the community. And there's a whole lot around IT that's coming to me now around that. So anyway, without further ado, let's not keep the panelists too nervous, hiding there at the back. So I'd just like to invite our panelists up to the stage, and I'll invite them as they come. One of them is, the first panelist is Joel Ironstone of Senosense. Joel, you ready to come up? And a great character that I mentored myself for a long time. I'd like to welcome Trevor Van Mierlo from Evolution Health Systems. Trevor's a very busy entrepreneur, but he tells me he's just come back from a week of deer hunting. And I told him we want this panel actually to be controversial and to argue with each other. And I think he didn't find any deer, so he's still ready to make a kill. And
see what I can do.
Finally, Alice Hodgson. Alice is a managing director of 1 Degree Bio. So these guys are all really successful entrepreneurs, really starting to scale their business. And what I'd first like to do is just to get them to introduce themselves. You know, we're going to be very informal for life science here. Normally, when we introduce presenters, I read their bios, and quite frankly, I just see somebody reading. But I'd rather ask them individually to introduce themselves and tell us what they're doing. And we're going to give them a bit of a challenge to do their elevator pitch, so you can get a sense of how they articulate their business. But first of all, Joel, if you'd like to introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about your background.
Sure. I'm Joel Ironstone. I'm the founder and CEO of Senescence Medical. I've been developing medical devices for about 15 years. My experience has been all the way from basic research to product development, regulatory approvals, operations, marketing, basically all phases of commercialization. And I think that was a reasonable foundation, but it didn't really prepare me for starting my own company and taking nothing and attempting and hopefully turning it into something grand. My technology, or Senescence, has developed a technology that enables personalized breast cancer risk assessment. So it can tell you your breast cancer risk at the point of care at your gynecologist's office. And it can also tell you what happens when you take drugs or engage in activities that change your breast cancer risk. So like cholesterol, where you can monitor it, you get sort of a scorecard for your cardiac health. There's ways where you can monitor your breast cancer risk to see whether you're engaging in things that can reduce it. And we're really the only technology that can do that at a gynecologist's office or at your family care's office. So you don't have to go get an x-ray or something that uses radiation. And we're excited. We've just finished our clinical trial and are now about to start to finalize commercialization of the product and bring it to the market hopefully next year.
Thanks, Joel. That's great. Okay, Trevor, can you introduce yourself to us and tell us a bit about your background?
I'm Trevor Van Mierlo. I founded Evolution Health a little over 10 years ago in the spare room in my condominium with one client and a whole bunch of passion. And 10, 12 years later, we're still here with thankfully more clients, and we've got a couple offices now. They're small offices, but we have a heck of a lot more passion, which is great because we've learned that along the way. What we do at Evolution Health is we build software that changes people's behavior. And that statement's been designed for you, or for whoever I'm speaking to say, how do you do that? And tell me a little bit more about how you actually can change someone's behavior. So, we find that's a great way to start off a conversation, is to actually get engaged with whoever we're talking with, and we've basically designed that question in order to meet those needs. So hopefully you'll find out a little bit more about what we do during the evening, and I'm really excited to be able to give as much advice or offer what I can to a whole bunch of cool people who are ready to take the plunge and be very brave and go and start something themselves.
Great, thanks, Trevor. And Alex, finally, can you tell us about 1 Degree Bio and what's happening there?
Well, 1 Degree Bio is a product review site for scientists. Our job is to get scientists around the world to share their experiences with the products they use every day and put them online so other scientists don't have to guess what products work, and they can just focus on doing great research. My path to 1 Degree has been anything but straight. I'm an international relations major, fell into a science lab for my first job, fell in love with it. Began working in purchasing, realized that there was a huge issue in purchasing and that there was a lot of guesswork that went on, and there was not a lot of places for scientists to find out which product's best. And decided, well, I'm going to go out and build one. And so that was 3 years ago today, and we have an office just across the street.
Cool. So Joel, what led you to become an entrepreneur?
Well, I've always liked solving problems or developing products, and I think entrepreneurship is taking that to the extreme, creating a whole company out of nothing, and that idea seduced me. Also, and working in a company doing this, you always think I could do it better, or and I had an idea that I really do think the world could benefit from, and I thought my background lined up with being able to execute it. So maybe it was a little bit of arrogance around what I could do, combined with certainly wanting to challenge myself and really see whether I could succeed.
How about you, Trevor?
It's a great question. I really don't consider myself an entrepreneur. When I was in high school with a guidance counselor, they said I should become a park ranger or something to do with being outside. But what happened during the dot-com boom, I was able to work for a company that sadly went out of business. But I had a really great idea, and I was quite passionate about it. I spoke about that passion with colleagues and friends and family. And what happened is, when that company was no longer successful, I was able to get a client. And I basically took that idea and began to work on it and expand it and talk with other people about it and meet scientists and meet business people. And it just managed to morph into something that was much bigger than I originally thought it was going to be. And I think when you're an entrepreneur, if that's what I am, you really need to follow that uncharted path. It is really a journey that you need to follow based on something that you feel is really worth it and something that can contribute back to the world.
Awesome. Awesome. So for all of you, and anybody can answer this question or all, if you knew what you know now, would you have started out on this path, or would you have done something differently?
I personally wouldn't have done anything else. I mean, I love what I do. I'm so lucky. It's been 3 really tough years, and there are those ugly days you don't want to get out of bed. But the electricity that I feel when I walk into my office and we're building something that we all believe in, it's addicting. It's that you just become addicted to the passion of the people that surround you. And I really could not imagine. I mean, I'm kind of ruined at this point because I could never go back to working for somebody else. I know that after 1 degree, I'm going to start building something else because it's one hell of a ride. I got to tell you, it's pretty awesome.
When I got started, I was, again, telling everyone about what we were doing. And I said, we're going to take typical protocols, what people when they go and see their doctor, they're given a course of therapy. We're going to put that online. And we're actually going to have them talk with other people who are going through the same course of therapy, anonymously, and it's on the internet. And we have to remember, this was 10, 11, 12 years ago, when people looked at me and they said, you're crazy. People talking with other people on the internet about private things like medicine and health. Very cute. And I actually had some other job offers, really great job offers at the time, but I was just compelled to go and begin this company because I realized that what I didn't want to do was be in my 50s, 60s, 70s and look back and say, why didn't I take that chance? And for that very reason, I was just compelled to go and start this company and move it forward. And I think you really can't get that when you're working for a big corporate giant. It's very challenging, though. It's very hard. And there's a lot of days, like you said, where you scratch your head and you say, why did I get into this? But on the other hand, there's nothing like charting your own course.
Yeah, I think my answer is very similar to Trevor's. If I didn't do this, every night I'd probably be sitting up thinking, today, should I start my company? Tomorrow, should I start my company? And eventually would have been the one that got away. So anyone who has an idea and thinks they want to become an entrepreneur, it doesn't mean you have to throw everything away and necessarily pursue your dream head down. But if you don't start making a plan and start going forward and today, the day that you think you can start, it's going to eat away at you, and eventually the opportunity is going to escape. So I think if I didn't do it, I would certainly be regretting it and frustrated right now. So I'm very happy that I did.
No, I think those are great insights because I've heard this in other subjects before about your passion, and if you imagine yourself at the end of your life and you look back and with respect to this particular issue, if I hadn't done this, how would I feel? Would I feel complete in my life's journey? And I think it's not a bad thing to reflect on when you're at the beginning, because it kind of focuses your energy on how you really feel about what you're doing. You get real, and it is about getting real.
And I think when you really get down to it, what do you have to lose? I mean, if you have your family, you have your friends, that's basically all you need. What you do have to lose is that opportunity. And I think all of us in this room probably agree. I mean, we see something that's out there, and you have an opportunity to go and grab it. Of course, you have to be cautious and do some planning, but it's something that you just have to do.
So do you think there's any difference between when you started out, the image you had of entrepreneurship that you had then and your image of it now? Can you actually articulate that? Can anybody articulate that?
I think when I started, certainly everyone, if you think of an entrepreneur, really on a positive light, you think of Steve Jobs, or there's a number of other people that you might not be able to recognize on the tip of your tongue. But there's a little bit of Willy Loman in that as well. As you're an entrepreneur and you're looking for money, and there are days where you're thwarted, and I think you have to wake up and feel like Steve Jobs every morning in order to make it to the end of the day without thinking that you're Willy Loman and start the next day over again. So I think, and that part of it, the dogged determination is something that you maybe intellectually expect, but when you actually feel it, it's very different, and I think it's character building.
Well, I think that I expected everything to happen faster. I thought money would come faster. I thought I definitely, and everybody told me, no matter how long you think it's going to take, double that. And I was like, oh yeah, for sure. And it still took longer. And it's, I think that's one thing that you can't beat yourself up over, because your initial expectations, you need to go through the process, and you need to grow as a person. It's okay to make mistakes. I mean, you as long as you learn from them. If you think you're going to all of a sudden get $1 million worth of funding in the first 3 months, it's probably not going to happen. So you might want to revisit those milestones. Yeah, that's
kind of interesting.
I was 28, so I knew nothing. I thought I knew everything, but I knew nothing. And it's great that I didn't realize that I knew nothing, because I probably wouldn't have made the bold steps that I did. So this is not to dissuade anyone who's over the age of 30 or under the age of 30 to start or not start a company. But it is a path of discovery. I started out with I have a BA in English and history. And as I grew in the IT and life sciences area, people said, why is a guy like you running a company in this area? And why are you publishing and presenting? So I went and I got a Master's of Science. And then I did a few master's degrees after that, and now I'm doing a doctorate studying cost models in our area. So what's great is that you have the ability to grow and mold and shape your way as your company expands. And I really would go into this with an open mind. All business plans are acts of fiction. Nobody's written a business plan and it comes out perfectly. So just be prepared for that.
Yeah, I mean, a business plan's an evolving document, and it's something that should be your script that you're trying to, it's just like writing a play, right? I mean, you're recrafting it and you're living by it and you're relearning it. You say, this part of the script doesn't work, so you change it. It's not like, everybody thinks that a business plan is something you write to raise funds, and it's actually not. It's really articulating the whole sense and vision of your business and how you're going to operate. It actually reflects back to you what's working and what doesn't, right? I mean, do you feel that? I mean, or...
Well, I mean, the way I think about it is that how we look as people when we're 3 years old is not the way we look at when we're 30, and neither will your business. So with the first shot at your business plan, how you think things are going to go is not the way it's going to go 3 years down the road. You learn, you adapt, you rewrite, you change your path. I mean, hell, I thought I was going to open a restaurant, and here I am running an online biotech. So the path changes, and you can't be afraid to move to the left or move to the right. I mean, because that's a part of the process. And I think that's something really to keep in mind, is that people sometimes get so focused on that one, how they think that idea is going to look like, they potentially can miss opportunities of what other, like the bigger picture around it, because you get so focused and it's so easy to do. And so that's why working with mentors, working with people outside of the bubble is really helpful to sort of pull you back, because as a founder, I mean, I still do it. I sometimes just can't look beyond sort of 2 steps in front of, and that's why I rely on my advisors, my boards, my colleagues to pull me back, so I can make sure I don't miss stuff.
Hey, you brought up this subject about raising funds, or I don't know, this is personally to me, I see so many people, and I was guilty of this myself in some ventures that I did. You think, okay, I need this much money, so I'm going to go and ask for this much money. And you said, you always need more, and it's sometimes twice as much. And raising more, if you can do it, if you articulate it, that buffer saves a lot of stress. And perhaps you could talk a little bit about the stress of raising money when you're running out of money, and the amount of time you actually spent raising money, and how that eats into it. Does anybody want to sort of talk about that subject a little bit?
Yeah, I can touch on it in a couple of ways, I think. One, I spent I probably spent 70–80% of my time raising for money, and then the other 80 or 90% of my time trying to run my business. So you can sort of, see how that adds up. But one of the things that I did, and I think it's probably good advice, is to try to, the sooner you raise money, the sooner you start to spend money every month, and you hire people, and you have a facility, and you have all these things that start to eat money. And then you quickly run out of money, but you can't go back to when you were in your garage. You can't go back to when you're at your house, where you're really not burning money that you can kind of beg, borrow, and steal to really add value, to build something with nothing, to pull in favors. And so the longer you can, the longer you can efficiently add value at that early phase, where you can solve all the problems. Because I'm telling you, if you're burning, I don't know, $500,000 a month or something, and you hit a problem that's delaying you by a few months, it's $1.5 million gone. If it's at the same time you can do the same thing, where you're not spending any money, maybe just you're kind of consuming your own family savings or something, depends how much you have. It's certainly a lot more efficient, and it becomes a lot less stressful. I've been glad when I've had to change course that I haven't been sort of burning money and had that guillotine hanging over my head while we're trying to figure that out.
I think I'd have to say it's really important to first establish what you want out of this company you're starting and where you want to go. Do you want to become rich and famous? Do you want to have a $100 million company? Do you want to have a $10 million company? Do you want to just create something that's going to save the world and then you're going to give it away? Because when you start raising money and you start walking that path, it's a slippery slope and there's no going back. Investors want a return on their investment. That's why they're investors. They're not going to keep giving you money if you keep losing it. So, as we've grown, we've been able to do it organically, and I would encourage everyone to try to stay as self-sufficient as you can. And when you do bring on partners, bring on the right partners if you want to grow your company. If you want to just raise some money and take a big salary cut, that's a whole other matter. But again, that gets back to understanding what the outcome is. Not necessarily your exit strategy, but what the outcome is that you want to reach.
I bootstrapped 1 Degree for about 18 months. This is the whole, going back to my stories, I thought it would take a lot less time to raise money. And it's tough. It's one thing is that, in the process of looking for money, there's a lot of strain, not only on yourself, your personal finances, your family. There's a lot of additional stress, not just the monetary stress that goes into sort of, bootstrapping it along. But, I do have to say that if I wouldn't have done it any other way, looking back, is that I would have gone just as far. I would have taken, I worked nights at chapters, ran 1 Degree during the day. And I mean, when I finally took venture investment, I had a product, I had a great team, we had proof of concept, we had traction in the market, and that negotiation and what came from that, you actually have something to negotiate with. So the longer you can go, and is my advice to anybody. And the other thing I want to say is that along that way, I actually got a lot of support from grants that came through Mars, grants that came through FedDev. There's a huge amount of programs out there, and they're 20K, they're 15K, 30K, but when you're small and you're working out of your living room, that stuff makes a huge difference. It doesn't dilute you. It's a way for you to hire that person you can't pay out of pocket. And for me, I hired my first 3 people based on getting grants so I could hire those people in. So I didn't have to pay out of pocket. So then try to sort of, we worked out of my old boss's lab for a year, even when we were funded, just to make sure that we could make sure that we spent all the money we could on building that product, not necessarily the fancy desks or the best computers or the 30-inch monitors, stuff that mattered. I mean, we hired people to make an awesome product, and because at the end of the day, the fancy monitors aren't going to necessarily mean that you're going to have a better product.
That's really good advice, actually, Alex. For those of you who don't know, I would encourage you. At Mars, our team is actually, I can see 2 of our team over there, Sonia and Rick. I'll introduce you to them later. We've been working on this. Where do you find funding in life science? So we actually invested in some research to trawl funding sources across Canada. And one of Kerry's team here, I don't know if her gender's here, have put together a funding database, but we're actually now going to start to really try to curate it and make it more relevant, having a better search engine in it, so you can use that. But still, I would encourage you to almost on a bi-weekly basis keep going back to that database, see what's going on, because funding programs come through, and some can come past us that we're not familiar with, that may be happening in Northern Ontario or in Quebec that could be relevant. So I would encourage you, that's really good advice. Thanks, Alex. I would encourage you to do that. Okay, moving right along. Actually, we were just talking about money. What do you think, what's the bigger challenge, money or talent? Very quick.
Never have enough of both, that's for sure. And it's a kind of an inverse relationship. When you have money, you don't have the people to create the products, and when you have the people and not the money, you got to pay for them somehow. And you don't want to start giving away equity and that type of thing. So I just have to say, if I had to choose one or the other, I would definitely choose people. Because if anything's going to grow your company, it's going to be people.
Yeah, I would disagree. I think there's really no substitute for money, but but here's why. I think, particularly when you're a startup, you may not need 100% of someone. You hire someone in. There's a lot of, even in Toronto, where maybe we're limited in our sort of medical device or biotech infrastructure, there's some great groups that you can pay for expertise that have been around for a while that can provide really experienced regulatory expertise, clinical expertise, product development expertise. So I can flex in talent. I don't know how to flex in money. If anyone knows, I'd love to hear it. But that's sort of my perspective on it.
Anything to add, Alex?
Well, I guess I would throw another thing in there. I'd throw passion. I mean that there is money and there's talent, but you can't buy passion. I mean, I'll agree that on sometimes when it's very hard for us to find talent who's passionate, talent that fits in with our existing talent. But at the end of the day, money's money. People have mortgages, people have their requirements. But for me, the people who started the company with me, they all have equity. That was a no-brainer. And that's just my personal belief, is that if I expect other people to work as hard for me and to build my dream and to believe in my dream as it's their dream, that they should reap the benefits. So all my core team holds equity, and most of my staff own options in the company, because if we're going to run like hell, we're going to run like hell together, and that's just sort of one of the core fundamentals of 1 Degree.
Yeah, I think passion. You're right. It's really underrated of the contribution that it has to any organization. I guess if you think about, I'm sure you've all had a number of jobs. I see quite a good smattering of gray hair in here. Myself included, and I always remember back with organizations that there's always one or two people that you remember that you've worked with who were passionate, and they drove people. They didn't drive them. They drove them by inspiration and just by example. And I think that's really key. No, thanks for bringing that up. So let's talk a little bit about life in Ontario and the healthcare system here. Pros and cons to starting up in Ontario, what that means to you, and challenges and opportunities that you've discovered. Do you have any thoughts about that, Joel?
I think there's some real advantages in Ontario. There's the SHRED, and that's Canada General, and the FedDev program, which we've had some success, really interesting external funders from outside who don't have access to those funding sources. But one of the challenges we've seen is that I think with medical devices in particular, the VCs have been moving later stage. So they're kind of investing more in mezzanine financing when companies have revenue and maybe don't need the money as much. And so who's been filling the gap in the States has been angel investors who've been funding earlier stage medical device companies. And around Boston, around California, you have big groups of angel investors who had success in medical devices, know the industry very well, and are funding young companies to go forward. In Canada, maybe because the market is smaller, we just don't have the same depth of medical device experience. The angel investor community is a lot smaller. So even though the VCs have moved upstream, I don't think we've had the same number of angels that have come to fill in the gap. And that has been, I think, a little bit of a problem operating in Ontario. in part because angels tend to invest locally. They want to be able to show up and see where you are, and they're not going to fly from California or Boston. They might, but they really have to be compelled by the idea or understand it well. So that's one of the limitations, but hopefully that's counterbalanced by some of the federal government programs that are out here.
Yeah, I think that issue of investing at a distance, I think that's pretty much almost the law. It's very rare for somebody to invest in more than 1,000 miles away, or even 500. They like to be close to where their investments are.
Mm-hmm. I think there's no doubt that if you want to grow, you have to go to the States. There's no question about it. However, we think of Canada and Ontario as a fantastic test market. I mean, look at the GTA here and all of the companies that are surrounding us. And programs like Mars, FedDev, like you mentioned, SR&E tax credits, an IRAP grant. We've just received one of those. It's a really, really great place to start off. And the community is quite small, so if you meet the right people, it can also speed that process up a little bit, and then you move to the States. So it's kind of a glass half full, half empty scenario, but I think we're pretty lucky to be able to be located here and have facilities like this. It's a great place to jumpstart.
I mean, our site's a bit different. I mean, in the sense that we are building a community. We have a business model, but we have 140,000 scientists worldwide. I was living in Boston, and I had the opportunity to start one degree in Boston, and I came back to Toronto. One reason is because my mother's here. In case things didn't work out, I had somewhere to sleep, and that's an honest truth. She converted my old bedroom from the office back to my old bedroom when I first started for the first year. And the reason I came back to Toronto is because Toronto's one of the 4th largest research centers. I mean, our user base, this is the perfect opportunity for us to reach out. And because we're online, I mean, it's easy for us, from there to build relationships with other universities. But being here has opened a huge amount of doors because of the thought leadership in the research community that was able to open doors elsewhere. So my investors are from the UK. And the portfolio companies that they invest in are from around the world, and all of them are completely jealous at the amount of money that I've gotten from the different government programs, because they don't exist anywhere else, and to the degrees that they do here. So that's really something that I think is for those starting out. It's huge to take advantage and get yourself educated in them, but I do agree. I mean, for the larger invest, that we had a lot of difficulty raising our first round here because yes, there's not a huge amount of players here in Toronto, and they're also, in my opinion, I feel there's a little bit more conservatism here in Toronto, whereas in the States, I feel like there's more people who are willing to take a leap in something that's maybe is new, first of its kind. And so that's sort of something just to be aware of. It doesn't mean it's a deal breaker, and there's a number of investors here that support great ideas here in the city, but it just requires that you sort of keep your eye on the ball of other opportunities. Possibly in Montreal, there's a number of funders there. Boston is also close. I know a number of groups up here who funded from Boston. It's close enough, but just sort of be the pros and cons of the marketplace for raising capital here.
Great. Do you see, or do you have any ideas or requests for additional support for entrepreneurs in Ontario? Is there anything that you think that's missing? I don't think there's anything missing. That's great.
What's missing is that a lot of people don't know about this type of thing that's going on. And I think Mars does a wonderful job at reaching out and trying to get as many people as possible, but it takes the entrepreneurial community, which is you guys also and all of us, to get in and help each other out and help this thing grow. If all of us want to make our hopes and dreams come to reality, we need to actually get out of our small offices, get out of our minds and go and meet as many people and utilize as many tools as possible. So it's also up to us.
I think we all need to be in the venues that are a bit like networking and things like that. it's not just talking about, BSing each other about, how great our idea is and things like that, but talking about the challenges that you have, and because I love talking about the stuff I did wrong. I did a whole lot of it, and nobody asks me about it. Nobody asks me about when I fell on my face, or the time I bombed an investor presentation, or the time that my mom popped up on Skype when I was doing, there's a lot of these things, and nobody wants to hear these stories. And and I think it's important that, because I find a lot of the networking events, there's a lot of people we're afraid to sort of talk about anything but fluff. And I think that it's really important that if you're really dedicated to building this idea, you want to learn from other people's mistakes before you do it yourself. Because you're probably going to make the same mistake. It'll look a little bit different, so you won't really realize, but at least you'll know how to handle it, because somebody will have said, well, this is how I recovered, and it wasn't the end of the world. So you'll get out of bed the next day, or not drown your sorrows in a keg of beer.
I think there's a lot of preparatory support in Toronto or Ontario. For example, it trains people to take their idea and turn it into a business. And there's a lot of support at Mars I certainly found for how do I communicate my business to potential investors. And then if you look at the support, and there's financial support, yes. But if you look at the support after, once you get financed, it starts to dwindle. And it's always been my belief that there's a lot of things that and this is really medical device focused, it's what I know, but there are a lot of things that are repeated. Every time a new medical device business starts, they have to create a quality system, they need to develop prototypes, they need to do a lot of things, they need to develop agreements that are typically standard. And maybe some of the stuff is available, and I just don't know. But I think if Mars wanted to proceed to the next level, it would really give some of these businesses a kickstart by providing a quality system that they can start to implement and support some of these downstream activities that I feel there's a whole lot of duplication. You're either paying an external provider to bring it in, and that's very expensive, or you're trying to figure it out yourself, and inevitably that's more expensive. Just lands on a different part of the balance sheet. So I would love to see in Toronto and Ontario more tangible support around how do you actually create your business once you have the money. I think that would be very helpful.
Cool. I just wanted to ask everybody, I actually discovered something that's kind of embarrassing. A couple of days ago, I was talking to Kerry. Where is Kerry? Is she gone? She's hiding down there. How many of you know that this is the Entrepreneurship 101 program in Toronto? This is the biggest entrepreneurship program on the planet. It's right here in Toronto. Yay, it is. It is. And kind of hats off to Kerry and her team. I just have no idea how they manage this whole thing. But I don't know if you know, but one of the other events that she had, so many people came in for one of the programs that escalator broke, and they were all sitting out there. They were sitting out there in the lobby. So there's a tremendous appetite, and I know we're just really jumping head over heels to support the demand. But I will say though, as an advisor, everybody wants advice, but there is nothing. This entrepreneurship program, it actually delivers so much advice. It's not just like going to school. It's really seriously good thing to do. So I would encourage you all, before you take a lot of advice, you're welcome to come in and, get a sense of an intake. But doing the entrepreneurship program, I haven't had anybody who says that it hasn't helped them. Nobody. So I would encourage it. Sounds like somebody else has been to one of those few of the programs. Okay, we're getting short on time here. So just to, before we go to the open mic forum and go to questions. One last question. Do you think people can learn to be entrepreneurs, or are they born that way?
This was a question that was asked during my entrepreneurship class when I did my MBA. And one of my MBAs was in Switzerland, and it was full of Swiss bankers. And they just loved this question because they couldn't understand why someone would go and be an entrepreneur. It's so risky. I just think it's something that you do. I don't really know that there's a real answer to that question. We tried to present a lot of models that tried to figure out one way or the other, and people do Myers-Briggs and all types of other tests. And I think it's just getting back to the passion. We spoke about passion a little bit earlier, and I think if anyone gets a little bit of passion, anyone can become an entrepreneur, and anyone can grow a company.
I don't think entrepreneurs are born. I think that the society, though, supports the development of an entrepreneur. And one of the things, I worry about is, is my child's generation going to be are they going to be more risk averse if you don't let your kids walk to school on their own? And there's really a perspective to reduce the risks, for our children. And people are becoming very risk averse. And how is that going to translate into, really saying, okay, I'm going to start a $100 million company? That's a lot harder than walking down the street to school or, doing establishing your own homework schedule or something. So I think I'm worried about whether our society is going to adversely affect the ability of our country to develop entrepreneurs.
I think that I think there's a misconception that an entrepreneur is the person who leads a company. I mean, for me, my team is full of entrepreneurs, and everybody, I couldn't have done it on my own. And a lot of them will say that they would have never envisioned themselves working at a startup, and they just caught the bug, and they just got hooked. And I think that you sometimes you're born into it because your family is entrepreneurs and that's what you grow up into and you see that passion. But I think it's just that passion is just infectious. I mean, whether you meet somebody or you get inspired by somebody who's doing their thing and that gets the gears rolling, or it was your parents who had their own store and you were a part of that since you were little. I mean, I think that it's all about whatever gets you hooked, and so I think both.
I would hazard to guess, though, that I don't know you that well, we just met, but I would imagine that you're a great leader from what I'm hearing, because it sounds like you're fostering entrepreneurship within your firm. And, I think that's something that's very, very special. If you're able to get a bunch of smart people together and inspire them to lead in their own direction by leading them, I think that's it's a fantastic winning formula that you must have, and congratulations for that. That's fantastic. That's great to hear.
Thank you.
I guess my story is it's not really a story, but in the early 80s I worked for Intel here in Canada before I left and just went all over the place. But I worked with a guy called Doug Cooper who ended up running Intel for Canada, and recently he left Intel and he left recently, so I guess he's kind of made money on the stock. I left money before I made money on the stock. And he invested in a couple of companies, and now he's an advisor at Communitech in Waterloo. And I went down and visited him a couple of months ago, and he said, I'm going to get involved advising startups. And I went down to see him, and he said to me, entrepreneurs who make money really deserve to make money. He said, because it's hard, it's really hard. But he said, my God, it's really fun. He said, it's just awesome. And he's so turned on to be part of that community. So it's really exciting. Hey, a round of applause for these guys. Thanks for those insights. That's just awesome. Thank you. That's great. Okay, so for the next part of the session, we are, oh, sorry, Carrie, you're going to?
No, oh, sorry. Just remember I'm over here, and I have questions from the webcast, because I'm behind you.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, thanks very much. So we're going to open questions to the floor. How do you want to run this, Carrie? One from you and then one from the floor?
That's probably the easiest.
Let's start off with you then, Carrie.
I can start. So this is just to anyone who wants to answer it. From Jeffrey Graham. He asks, what qualities and skills are the most important in a business partner?
Compatibility, I would have to say, with a business partner. Do you guys have business partners?
Yeah, any skill you don't have. My partner and I have very complementary skill set, but except for the ability to kind of calmly resolve conflict, that's
for me.
That's kind of universal.
Talking about Myers-Briggs, mine's the ENTJ, which is the field marshal. So I have the potential of getting people really, really angry at me. So I need someone that I can trust, that can tell me when to back off and settle down, and that has done a tremendous amount of service for us, because I can go on, and sometimes I need to chill out.
I agree with both, but I also would say your business partner has got to have just as much skin in the game as you do. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, I mean, people always equate that to money. It doesn't necessarily have to be, they don't have to put dollar for dollar down, but they have to be, whether it's time, whether it's, sales or leads or something. You have to, because that will be the first thing that you guys are going to start arguing about, and it's a tension that if you feel that one person's pulling more weight than the other, I've seen it happen to so many startups. I mean, we went through it initially ourselves, and and it's tough. So you've got to make sure you're you compatible, that you the whole balancing each other out. But again, skin in the game. You both got to be there. You both got to be committed, and you both have to be 100% sure that you're both in, or three, or how many people are business partners. You're all in it to win it. To be cliche.
Cool. So, this gentleman over here, I think you were the first to stand up. Is that true?
Yes.
Let's do this fair. Okay.
Mars does a fabulous job of giving us the mechanics, business plan, communications, HR. But as far as entrepreneurship, the human element, I'd like to ask all three of you, what was either the low point, the Willy Loman moment, or the high point, the aha moment, at which you decided, I am now at the point of no return. I am going to be an entrepreneur.
That point where I knew I was going to be an entrepreneur when I got, the point of no return is when I turned down jobs at a business school and called my mother and let her know, and there was a gasp and a sigh because my dad was a serial entrepreneur, and she's like, oh God, here we go again. I mean, one of the low parts was when I had literally drained all of my savings, and my mom asked me if she wanted me if I believed in the idea enough for her to mortgage the house. And she luckily didn't have to do it, but that was one of the hardest points, is that test your sort of, there was moments I was like, oh, working for somebody else would be, you have 2 weeks off, this question would never happen if I was working for somebody else. But there are a lot of low points. But luckily the high points are so high that it balances out in the end, and what you learn is amazing. But they're definitely the low points.
High points for me is getting new contracts, publishing papers, having team members come up with an idea or a concept, and then actually watching it get launched and introducing that to existing clients or new clients. There's a lot of low points too. When you're an entrepreneur, you really need to wear a lot of hats. So firing people is not nice, even when they deserve it, even when they're costing you money. I always find that to be a really difficult thing. So I have to agree, there are a lot of highs and lows, and they're not just financial, although again, finance is, as you'll probably agree, extremely important, as you've mentioned before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think probably when I decided, I'm going to run for this, is when, I have this idea I've been sort of passing around, people have heard about it, and I start to get emails from people desperate to use my product, which they can't use because it's a medical device and it's not approved in their jurisdiction. And then I thought, if these people are really, and because they thought it could help people, because they, it solves this kind of clinical problem. And so then I start to feel like I better get this out there. And that combined with, so my wife was pregnant about when we were starting to launch this company. I thought I better do this now before I have to kind of pay for college. So there's a window of opportunity, I think, when not that there's ever a good time, but now is certainly always better than later, I think.
Cool. Carrie, have you got another one for us over there before we go to this lady?
Yes. Is it essential to quit your job to start a business? Coming from Pansy.
Well, I mean,
Depends on the
depends.
business.
It does. I think it depends. I mean, for me, I made the commitment that right out of school, I was going to, this is it. If I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And, but my business partner, he has 2 other startups that he runs. And so he essentially has 2, and they're more mature. He has 2 other jobs that he still does, and he does the 1 Degree Bio stuff in somehow the 25 to 30 hours in a day he seems to find. So it's possible. It's just You just have to be really honest with your milestones, with sort of what progress you expect to make, and just factor that in. I mean, there's pros and cons to doing it either way. So,
I think whoever asked that question, they'll know the answer to that question in their gut. And if they're questioning that, they shouldn't make the move. But if they're ready to go, they should listen to what they're telling themselves and actually take the plunge. It's kind of like, and with other entrepreneurs I spoke to, it's kind of like jumping in the cold lake. Eventually, you do get to the point where you jump into the lake. And
yeah, I think the answer is eventually. But I think you have to acknowledge that not every entrepreneur, potential entrepreneur, who has a great idea has the luxury of being able to quit their job. But once again, I don't think that means that they can't make progress in their business. So, clearly you're going to make more progress if you're spending full time, but you can keep adding the value until things come together and you can leave your job. I don't think, from my experience with other entrepreneurs, it's not sort of something that's only available to people who have a bank account built up and can walk away from their job. It's something that anyone can pursue.
Yeah, I would also recommend that you try to identify some of the core assets that you've got in the business before you jump. Like, for instance, just checking if you've got IP. If you become a Mars client, you can evaluate. You can go quite a long way. You get 4 free hours if you become a Mars client to evaluate whether your IP is worth anything and whether you shouldn't mortgage the house. So don't do that. I had another friend in the UK. He was the director of art for Yellow Pages. And he wanted to put Yellow Pages on mobile. This is a long time ago. He jumped and started to do it and ran out of money and never did it. And when people who were working for him found out what he was doing, they said, "Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped you develop a lot of this before you'd even left." So there are scenarios. So just sort of think it through. Don't jump, I guess, is my advice. So I think, I'm not sure, can you self-regulate? Who out of you two, this lady and gentleman were first, but I'm happy to.
I don't know.
Ladies first. Is that okay?
Alrighty, thanks much. Question, actually 2 of the 3 of you talk about working with the States. If you want to go to the States. One of you has talked about working with Europe. The States is in a lot of trouble. I wonder why you also wouldn't, why you wouldn't encourage people to go to Europe in terms of doing business.
Well, Europe came to me. I mean,
Okay.
in the sense, like it was a very perfect match for us. I mean, there's a group in the UK called Digital Science. We are a digital science type thing. So, and they also have an office in Boston, but I mean, their headquarters are in the UK. But I went all over to try to raise money for 1 degree, and I couldn't get money in the States. I couldn't get money. I got offered money in the Middle East, but it was in space, but not actually money, cash. Which is not really helpful when you need to hire people and you don't need space necessarily. There are other venues, but there's a lot more barriers to just knowing the market, knowing who's out there. The language barrier, I mean, it's even a bigger distance now. The IP. Absolutely. I mean, really, you have to sort of see whatever assets that you have that you think, I mean, whether if you're multilingual, if you got dual nationality, start looking at different grants in that program in that country, figure out if there's something that you're eligible for. I mean, really go to the, whatever extreme. I mean, really, it's just like, I would say though, it's just there is a lot more challenges going to, I mean, you have to be educated in IP law, how going to different countries are going to impact your IP, the ownership structure before, because you want to make sure that you're walking into that room with all the facts.
I know we have similar contract law and jurisprudence in the States, but everybody's getting closer.
Sorry, nobody can
excuse
hear.
me, can you just go back to the microphone?
Yeah, nobody
because
can hear on the
everybody can hear the
webcast.
question. Sorry about that, thanks. That's okay.
Sorry. Where was it? I know we have similar jurisprudence and similar contract law as the States. However, countries are moving closer to sort of, I won't call it a happy medium yet, because we know there's a lot of tug of war in different countries and in different regions. But there is a push toward getting some commonality there, so it should be easier for us to be able to deal with different countries. So I found it interesting that you were the only one who was talking about working with Europe, whereas the other two gentlemen on the panel had not that you maybe had not thought of that, but
we've worked in Europe, we've worked in Asia, we've worked in the States, we've worked in South America, and one thing I have to say is you cannot underestimate the radical cultural, financial, legal differences that there are with all of these countries. And if you start to get in trouble, how are you going to pay to get yourself out of trouble, or how are you going to pay to go and sue someone who is living in China? Good luck. So
Latin America would be more my thing, because I'm from Puerto Rico.
I think this is where strategic planning really comes into place, and working with some advisors. And there's people here at Mars that can give you advice on this, and making sure that when you make the move, you make the right move at the right time.
Thanks much.
This quote over here.
Okay. Was there ever a time when you were pursuing your entrepreneurship in life sciences and healthcare and you thought, I don't think we should go forward from this point, or somebody tried to convince you that your idea was not a sustainable idea, and how did you overcome that obstacle?
Good question. Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I think we've all had, that first, second, third, fourth, fifth rejection. I think you have to have a certain amount of faith, and there's statistics that bear out that it's very unlikely that your endeavor is going to succeed, and being an entrepreneur is probably a bad bet. But I think we're all in this because we think we're different somehow. Even though everyone thinks the person beside us isn't different, we all think we're different, and our endeavor is going to succeed. And I think you really have to have a very, a big low-pass filter. You're going to have downs, and you just got to ignore them until there's another up, and then you can kind of balance them out. Otherwise, you can, I think, become crazy.
I'd have to agree.
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be people that are going to tell you, no, you can't. I mean, they were there when you were kids. They were there in high school. They're always going to be there. And I mean, the one thing I'd say is that if somebody criticizes your idea, don't necessarily just block them out, especially if they're, somebody who's been in business. I mean, when I got rejected a lot when I went for investment, and and they said, oh, why don't you just make it a lifestyle company so you can have like a little cottage and you can just have a family and all these kind of things. And I was like, or I could do it this way, and we'll. But the key is to figure out, why are they saying it? Is there any merit? Is there any feedback that you can take out of it? And there's sometimes there's not. They just are. That's just who they are in nature. They're risk adverse. But there are nuggets that you can get from people's feedback like that. Maybe you're not explaining yourself. Maybe the idea is not coming across clear enough, that the value prop is not there. They don't necessarily see how you are going to make money. So just take that and sort of mull over that a little bit before you just earmuff.
We can take a question from Twitter. Can we do that?
Yeah.
Coming from Jen, a question for Alex. You mentioned that no one ever asks about the lows. Can you share your biggest challenges with starting up One Degree Bio?
I really think the biggest challenges was trying to do everything and because One Degree Bio is about building a community, but to build a community, we needed vendors to send us their products and list their products, but they really didn't bother with us because we didn't have a community. And it was trying to figure out how this chicken and the egg dance was going to work, and it was really frustrating. I launched One Degree with 70 people, most of which were family and friends. And it took a long time, a lot of asking people for help, and that's something that's really hard for a lot. It was very hard for me to do, is to sort of admit to people that I was having a challenge, reaching out to different scientists, admitting to people who potentially had invested already so much time with me that I just didn't have all the answers. And it was a humbling process, and that wasn't like a 2-day thing. That went for a number of months. And finally, after I was really honest with the people and the advisors around me of the challenges I was having, they gave me the feedback, and I began to be able to figure out what I needed and find the people and get the connections. And I think that was the hardest thing, is just admitting that you can't do everything, and and yeah, reconciling that.
Anybody want to add? So, any other questions? So we take one. I'm so bad at this. I didn't see.
Okay, well, I will go. I came up with an idea maybe 18 months ago, and I sort of shared it with a few of my friends, and they kind of went, I'm not so sure about that. And then all of a sudden, they had told friends who had told friends that I had this idea, and they started to come to me. So I started consulting with people, to the point now that I have enough people, I think, that are consulting with me for the information that they think I have, that I want to start a business doing this. What I want to know, I'm at the point where I'm trying to pick a business name. How did you do it? Because you need something that's catchy, right? Something that people are going to know.
I mean, something that the domain's free.
That's right.
And that gets harder. I mean, we started off with BioHub, and then we realized that seemed all great. It was free in Canada and things like that. And then we realized that BioHub is also the name that any place with 2 biotechs is called. So there were some challenges there. And then there was a French company that made made gas out of corn. That was also called BioHub. And then even though they were different, French trademark law is very different than US and law. And to avoid any lengthy battles, we changed our name to 1 Degree Bio. And it was literally because we went through a number of options, and this was one of the few names that was the domains were free.
Yeah, that didn't even occur to me.
Our situation was a little bit different. We started with the client and we had to incorporate the next day. So we had the parent company of Evolution Health has the most boring name. But what happened is we focused on developing the product rather than going out and selling. So it's all your strategy. A couple years later, when we started to accumulate more clients, they said, the company was called VCC. They said, what does that stand for? It has nothing to do with the product or the service that you're offering. So we actually hired a company out of New York to do an extensive search, an interview with all of our existing clients, an interview with our staff, and they came up with Evolution Health. So I think a name is extremely important. If you need to get the right name right off the bat,
Something close, anyway.
Something close, but get yourself going. Don't let it stop you. It'll come.
Yeah, I asked my wife, and she came up with the name for my company.
That's the right answer to everything.
But, you know, it's frequently misspelled, is the only thing.
Okay, next question. Over here.
Hi.
Hi.
Really enjoying this session. I'm a scientist, and I have my great idea that's going to make $100 million. I feel like my time, my 23 hours a day I'll be working on this are better spent doing the science. But then when I say that, I feel like I'm trying to eat cake and not eat any vegetables. In terms of fundraising, in terms of HR, in terms of all of that, am I just going to have to bite the bullet and learn how to do all of that too? Or am I able to find someone to kind of do the, what I would call the less, the less scientific parts of starting a business? And if so, how do I find that person?
Do you want me to ask that?
But I mean actually getting someone on my payroll.
Yeah, so I guess if the first step, I mean, if you're a core scientist and you spend all your time in school, in university, and then in the lab, you may have some excellent entrepreneurship skills buried deep within you. I suspect that at this point, if a lot of the work's going to be around developing the science around this or developing a product, you should be looking for a partner and somebody you can convince who's really interested. Good place to start, though, is always with IP. So, come to Mars, schedule an appointment, which is free, with an IP strategist, one of our legal partners. They'll tell you where you're at, and then once you've got that, then you've got some equity that will attract a partner, and we can help you to go from there. But there are also, I mean, there are interesting groups you can join. I mean, even going to hackathons. There are engineers who implement stuff who are interested, but also things like clinicians and entrepreneurs and even venture capitalists and angels hover around, because when you think of it from the financer's side, they're looking for deals. So they're often looking down the tube to see if there's something really cool they can get involved with. And they always know, they know some of the other people. So that all of those kinds of networking, get your IP locked down, know what it is, if it is indeed valid. And then you can start to wander around and just sell that to attract that partner. Because you're really building an asset, and a partner is part of the asset. So get that asset first. That's what I would do.
But I mean, that still requires getting staff to help you work and, you know, to build the product. I mean, I can't necessarily build it all myself. It's going to take more than one person. But you know, I'm listening to the panelists who talk about kind of wearing all these different hats. You know, doing the fundraising, doing the hiring the staff and all of that, and you know, is it stuff that just has to be learned by the person who wants to start the business, or is this?
I think running a business, yeah. I mean, you either have a feel for it. I mean, in your own life, do you work alone? You know, in your research lab, do you manage people? You've ever managed people before?
Not to the degree that I would if I was running a business.
No, then so, you know, just that's okay. So just accept your strengths and weaknesses and go and fill those in. And you know, if you get somebody around you who is a good manager, maybe you'll adopt some of those skills. And but it's best to think about. I think one of the key entrepreneurial things is to think about. You know, you want to try and use as much of other people's money as you can. You want to try and use other people's resources and skills as much as you can. So just think that way to start with. And that's a good place to start, because you'll probably spend a lot of time getting really bogged down on things you're not good at the beginning. You'll just run out of energy.
And Peter, I'd have to say that Mars is really fantastic at helping you find staff. We've found, through these resources here, we found 2 key personnel that I don't think we would have found any other way. So
yeah, and
as far as networking and talking to people, I mean, this is a fantastic resource. So embed yourself in the culture, start bugging people and calling them and sending emails. They will get back to you here, and it's a resource that's here for you to use, and a lot of other people use it. So
yeah, I mean, and Trevor's a really bright guy, but he's also very aware of what he can and can't do. Yeah. And you need to really list that out and get aware of what you can and can't do. And that will open a space for those other blanks to be filled, you know?
Or don't want to do.
Or don't
want to do.
Lots of
things that I don't want to do.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, absolutely.
You would just start with one person. That's the thing, is you start with one person, see. I mean, I think that sometimes we get ahead of ourselves. I mean, when I started, I thought, okay, we need to get like 4 people. And when I found one good person, I was like, holy crap, we got so much stuff done. I mean, just adding one more body, and it gives you an idea of how many, I mean, as you grow, and it just, it takes the load off a lot, because being that one person is really overwhelming. And I think sometimes you get caught up in trying to forecast how many people and things, is that just one person at a time, and then just sort of see, and be choosy for that first person. I mean, and I agree, you have to be honest with yourself what you're good at, what you're not good at. I'm really crappy at numbers, so I have people in my circle who are much better than I am, and I also hate doing them, so it works out well. But you know, be really choosy for that first person, because those are the people that hopefully you want to be with you as you grow your idea, and it'll be their idea too. But if for little things like HR and advice and things like that, like look into your own LinkedIn network, friends, family, people who can give you a bit of advice on, like I have a friend who is an HR lawyer, who sort of, when I got started, would send me a bit of information, so I didn't have to find a firm or things like that. I mean, in addition to the resources that are here, is that you'd be surprised if you have who you know when you go poke around LinkedIn.
Okay. Actually, we've got about 15 minutes left, so we got 5 people over here. Yeah. And how many you got over there, Carrie?
Not any right now. Let's just take the last 4 questions. And then what we'll do is we will immediately go into the networking area. And I'll just ask, because sometimes our speakers get cornered and more questions here, but let's let them get out and get access to food and drinks, and then we'll finish up with questions out there.
Yeah, we'll try and do a couple of minutes each on these last 4. Thanks for your patience. Are you next, or?
I'm next.
Okay, good.
So question for all 3 entrepreneurs. What is the worst mistake that you make in your startup life? And if you see one of us aspiring entrepreneur falling into the same trap? What are you going to say to us to pull us back?
Worst mistake. I don't know if I've made any mistakes. No. It's hard to rank them and choose the worst one. I think one of the things I did, and this is going to go contrary to maybe what I've said before, is I think I almost, in the beginning, you get so much advice, and everyone's got an opinion, and you have your own opinion. You're the one who knows your business the best, and I think you have to make sure not to step too far away from your gut or what you think your business is. You have to listen to everyone, understand exactly where they're coming from, and if you understand why they're saying what they're saying, but disagree, stay with your gut. Don't be so quickly swayed by someone who has a new perspective on your business, because you'll be tacking too quickly. So, and that's the advice I would give you, is if you believe in your business, make sure you continue that belief, throughout, not to the extent that you ignore what people are saying, but keep faith in why you started the business in the first place.
I think you'll grow to a point where you'll need to replace old new resources with new resources, and that's key to your continued success and your continued growth. So anticipating that and acting on that when it happens is going to be a key factor in your growth strategy.
So I've got two. The first one is you have to be really open and honest, and remember that you have friends and family. Because when you get started, you just get so focused, and I actually would get calls from family members making sure I wasn't in a ditch because they haven't heard from me in 3 weeks, and I had no idea. And all you do is talk about work. You forget to ask how they're doing. You forget birthdays, and it's just because especially when it comes down to money and you're running and you're just trying to make it happen. And you have to, whether it's a Post-it note to say, that, or to remind you that there are other people who love you, and they worry about you because you begin looking like you haven't eaten, that you've been living off coffee and energy drinks, and that so it's just something to be really aware of, is that they're going down this road with you. So you have to keep communicating, and you have to remind yourself. And the other thing is that, I started wanting to be right out of business school. And at business school, I was told, you really should look a certain way. You got to wear the black suit to meetings with a white shirt, and you've got to be this image, because that's how that stuff matters. And it does to a degree. But I spent probably the first 6 months being so uncomfortable trying to be this image of myself that I thought I should be, that it took away from me the passion that I had for my business. And then it got to the point after a certain number of rejections that I was like, that's it. Okay, we're going back to the old way. And since that day, I've never worn a black suit again. And I wear jeans, and I am what I am. And there's you have business casual and stuff like that. But if you're not comfortable, dressed in a certain way, then don't wear it. I mean, that you figure out what makes you comfortable, dress appropriately, but you don't have to fit into anybody else's cookie cutter. Because it takes away from that excitement that an investor or whoever, a customer, is going to see about your product and yourself. So
okay. That's why you're in purple.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question over here.
Hi, it's Reza from Emergica. Thank you very much for coming over. Back to that earlier stage thing, I want to think back maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when you were in a startup, whenever it was. Would you rather to start your business all of a sudden an upscale full service, rent a nice office, have all the equipment, have a top of the line website, everything prepared, and go to the market to look very professionally for the customer, or start from little by little from your basement, work from your den, then next step, bring a little money, then invest that, then bring a little money more, then move forward. That's one part of the question. And the second part, if you don't mind answering that as well, back to that strategic planning, and when you are ready to find other people. I've always heard that it's good to surround yourself with the right group of people, so when you need help, they would be handy. When you get to the point that you feel you need that assistance, whether it's from the beginning or later at this stage. Say, for example, you are developing a product and you need a software engineer, or you need a marketing specialist to take it to the market, or the core part of your project. Would you rather partner with them, give them a share of your company, and then in return, in long term, they will have more benefit, but initially you don't have to spend much in paying them? Or would you rather contract those pieces to other people, but don't give them a share of the company? I don't know
think
if I was
there's a
able
lot
to
of
make
questions
myself
there.
clear.
There's a lot of questions.
I think I can answer. I'm
Good.
a little bit biased because I came out of a company that did a third round financing for $80 million, had offices in downtown Toronto, downtown New York. The staffing went from 9 people to 350 people and went out of business. So, and it's a shame because the original people who joined the company had a lot of passion, had a lot of drive, and it was very, very upsetting for us when the whole thing crashed and burned. So I think, especially with the fact that technology moves so fast and healthcare moves so slow, there's a juxtaposition there. I would rather take a very staged approach rather than getting a bunch of money in at once and then blowing it. As far as growing the organization goes, I would rather pay people money and keep the equity. But that depends on the individual and what level they're at also. If you're going to find someone who's key, you're often going to have a profit sharing plan, or you're going to have to give them a piece of the company to retain them and to keep their interest. So that's just my approach, and I don't think there's any right answer to that question. I don't think.
Yeah, I think one thing, and you don't realize this when you're starting a company, I guess, and that's something to realize only as you start to dish it out, there's only so much equity, and it goes quickly. And you start, and you have to you want to keep in mind that throughout the whole life of your company, you have to continually incentivize key people with equity. You want them to be partners. So you have to be a little bit cautious about how you're distributing that and thinking about stock options as the company grows. Which is why, I'm not going to say there's always more money, but eventually, hopefully, you're generating lots of revenues, and there will be. So long-term money is a lot cheaper than equity.
I think
Great.
my last thing is that all the flash in the world, like people see through it in a second if you got no substance. So growing it bit by bit, you tend to have. If by putting your product out there, this doesn't work for this doesn't work for pharma. Like you can't have a pharma company out of your living room. But for a lot of companies, like if you have the opportunity to do it bit by bit, you throw the product out there, you get feedback, you build off that feedback, as opposed to building something, thinking you know what the customer wants, having this beautiful storefront, everything looks perfect, and nobody walks through your door because you're off the mark, because you didn't go through that iterative process that happens when you put it out there, get feedback, and it could save you a lot of money. But that is industry specific, but glass desks, chrome furniture, all that kind of stuff doesn't make your product any better. And it's hard because as a founder, you want to make the product perfect, and you don't want to. It's hard to get it out of the nest when you first start. But that's one thing that I learned, and now we literally push features out. We push features out, and then people love them, people hate them, and we do some our own internal testing. But you are your biggest critic for a lot of times, and for an early stage company, you just gotta leave it to the market to help you get feedback. But that's specific on different specific industries. So.
I also have to say, if your office is in First Canadian Place and you're a startup company, your first clients are going to say, why are these people operating out of First Canadian Place? Why am I funding the growth of your company? So strategies and the way you present yourself is very important to again, how you grow.
You're just killing me with that answer because my office is in First Canadian Place. It's on the 3rd floor.
You need to cut your rates by 75%. No, I'm just kidding. That's what they might say, though.
Thank you.
Next question.
So this question's for all 3 entrepreneurs. Just wondering if you could talk about how you came to your initial big idea. Was there a set brainstorming process, or was it something that just came to you?
I was in business school, and I did a project for my old lab. We spent about $300,000 a month on stuff. And we just bought multiple versions of stuff because that's the best way that we knew that there was quality issues, but we had to get our experiment done by Friday. And I went to business school, and I was like, well, there's got to be a better way. And those are like the words that kill all entrepreneurs. That starts the ball rolling. And I started coming up with the plan of how we could do something like a TripAdvisor or a Yelp or something that in every other industry. And that's sort of what kicked my thing, is that there wasn't anything like that in life science. So it was more frustration and just.
For myself, I was a project manager on a smoking cessation program, and I saw people actually getting well and sharing information and quitting smoking and helping other people and coming back, and I was looking at the data, and I'm a bit of a data geek, and I said, oh my God, I can't believe this is happening. We can take this, we can grow it, we can apply it to different indications, different disease conditions. Wow, this is a fantastic opportunity. And I couldn't sleep at night. And it just went from there.
I was, prior to this company, there's a few companies back where I worked. It was in another breast cancer system that, and it actually hit a wall at 100 miles an hour because the clinical trial was so huge and the regulatory hurdles were so big and the amount of money that was required to get it to the market and there were all sorts of problems. So that went bankrupt. But I think from the ashes of that came this idea, which was actually a kind of an efficient way to make a very substantial impact. So it was really learning from a failure before where this idea emerged.
And I think we got time for one more question. Do you have any more over there, Kurt?
I actually do. There's always one at Meet the Entrepreneurs about how do you achieve balance. So what are some tricks to balancing a startup and all the other responsibilities in your life? This comes from Sarah.
I'm still learning. I have not learned the work-life balance, and I still struggle with that a lot. And it's something that I've actually asked my friends to let me know, and it's very cyclical. Just like your business, some days it crunch time, and then I just drop off the face of the earth, and you don't realize. So it's something it's a huge struggle for entrepreneurs. I mean, my dad was like that. It doesn't matter what your background is. Sometimes if you're really passionate about what you're doing, it's very difficult to manage your time because your time you think of your time as free. That your time, that you don't necessarily, if something needs to be done, you'll do it because, if you don't have the hands or something like that. So you forget that there's only 24 hours in the day and there's other responsibilities and things like that. And so I delegated that out to my loved ones to remind me that I need to go and sort of manage, or not manage, but get better at managing my time and prioritize them sometimes.
That's a good answer.
I rent an office near my house, and so, it's cutting down on commuting time or being able to kind of, come home for a couple hours, put the kids to bed, then go back to work for a couple hours, and try to make sure there's, at least a few hours a day where I'm doing something else, or, I know my other friend who runs a company, make sure he bikes, and he has an office intentionally far away from his house, so he's got kind of 45 minutes to clear his head while he's biking, and I think there are kind of things you can do where you can. It means you're scheduling your life a little bit more, but you can carve out, and I think you have to, because of what Alex is saying, you can forget. So you have to make sure you opt into time outside of work and make sure that's also a priority, whatever that amount of time can be.
I also think when you start your own company, there's a tremendous amount of control that you have. And you have to be extremely disciplined, but you can control your day. If you want to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and do some work, and then do something else, and then go into the office, and then I grab a nap, maybe a bit of an unhealthy lifestyle unless you get into a pattern. But again, understanding where you are and what you have control over and what you don't is key to being able to achieve what they call a work-life balance, but I'm still not really sure what that is.
I think that comment about doing international business, so I had a business in California and I was helping companies in the Far East bring stuff into the States and into Europe because I used to live in Europe. And you've got to be very careful. The day doesn't end. So, I mean, if you're here and you want to do business in the Far East, just really think carefully about what that means, because you can just end your life with 24-hour days really quick. So, we got one more question. Thank you for waiting for so long.
So I'm a medical device person. I understand, getting feedback from the surgeons, getting the patents, getting regulatory through, building the prototype. I'm standing there with my great idea that all the surgeons say is great, and I've figured out how to get the 510K and get the patent. How do you make the first 100 and get them out? You can't have a full ISO certified facility and all the machines and all the custom fixtures and your own autoclave. How do you sort of get through the first 1,000 medical devices going out the door?
So I can answer that. I think there's actually an answer to that question, unlike a lot of questions in this world. There's some really good medical device contract manufacturers that'll do turnkey development for you. So they will, you give them your specification, they're ISO certified, they're FDA registered, and because of those 2 registrations, they can actually drop ship to your customers, your distributors. And this is what I'm intending to do with my device, is basically have them manufacture it for it. I get a PO, I give the contract manufacturer PO, and they send it. So I know that that's the same for disposables. You can get it, the same people do it for medical capital equipment. So you can actually, once you have your specifications, transfer it over, and I'm not going to say sit back and collect the checks, but your marketing department can drive your sales, and you don't have to invest that. You still need a quality system under which to do your development, but the manufacturing side and all those fixtures, you don't need a clean room, all that can be outsourced very easily. And I can actually provide you with some contacts if you're interested.
Yeah, if you could drop some names, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, panel, and thank you for the people with the questions. I really enjoyed this session. I've never done one of these sessions before, well, not at Mars anyway, and I'm not sure what the protocol is, but I do know that my protocol here is to thank you guys very much for taking time out. I hope everybody really enjoyed that. It was terrific. Thank you.